Testing. Okay, so you can call this what you want, a hot rod tutorial, a work through, work around. But I had a flamethrower that worked before 13 that stopped working when they changed the sound. So here's my first flamethrower. And that's what happens. Alright, argument out of range exception, argument is out of range, parameter name index. So, task. And I'll try and edit out when I restart the game up. So my flamethrower starts with the cook meat repeat, I had the MP fire end, and then the two augers for empty and reload. And this worked before 13. So I did a lot of searching, a lot of research, I guess you'd call it, thinking, looking around. I'll spare you that. But I went to the sounds.xml, and I looked for cook meat first. And there it is. Cook meat's just got one entry in there, so I'm not sure. I mean, I messed with voices and everything. Let's take a look at the MP fire end, MP5. And I noticed the only time you find the fire end is as part of this sound data node. So you have fire start is what it's called, the data node, and then it includes the start, loop, and end. So I went back to look at the MP5. And it says fire start, fire loop, fire end. So apparently, what I discovered was, if this is the only place that audio file exists, right? It doesn't exist outside. Like the reload, I can use anywhere because it's not part of a pre-existing sound data node lineup, I guess you could call it. So if I want to use this, I either have to do this, I have to copy this, paste it, create another single entry and put that in there, and then call it the MP fire end, right, with the correct path to the sound data node. Or I have to go, well, back to my items and remove it from my what you call it, my sounds there. However, I would still get a what do you call it, an error, because the cooked meat and the repeat is not on a loop. It wasn't working for me. So what I found you had to do, again, you can create a separate fire end entry, but I copied this, alright? And I created, for my flamethrower, I'll rename this. Alright, I called one flamethrower fire start 2. And in them, I created my own loops. Okay? So let's go back to the MP5N for one of them. Let's throw that in here. We're gonna Avalanche might be a bit much, huh? We'll see if that works. So I'm calling it Avalanche, the sound start, and that's going to be also, it's going to be the first clip, but it's also going to be the name. This is where it's looking, all right? The sound start is going to be looking for the sound data node name, and then it's going to go through the 3, which I have is Avalanche. Let's change that. This one, the fire medium loop. Actually, they all match. And the MP fire end. Alright, and that should match that loop. Now the flamethrower fire start, let's go to the first flamethrower. You notice I had cooked meat as the first one. That's not working. So flamethrower fire start, fire loop, forge fire die. Let's check. Nope, they don't match, do they? So let's change that up. Now, I'll pause here to tell you something now before you continue. If you put a looping like this, that's what this is, loop here, LP. If you put a loop audio clip as your first action, so when you fire up and it starts the loop, you'll get stuck in the loop like you've had with the mini bike or the auger or the chainsaw. It just won't shut off. So never have your loop in the first three. Okay, so flamethrower fire start should cook meat, loop the large fire, and then forge fire die. Fire large loop, forge fire die, boom. Okay, let's go in the game now and check it. Okay, so our first one. Alright, that sound at the end was the forge fire die. You hear the torch idle, which is an entry I have. Alright, see the torch idle? That's sound idle is the torch. You know, I can make that whatever I wanted. And that large fire is, and then the forge fire die. And I chose these from the waves. I was listening, I said, what do I want? Yeah, so I knew I liked that one. Here was the medium. That sounds pretty cool too. Small sucks. I mean, that's a freaking campfire. And then you find the forge. Well, let's see if we can find the MP5. Is that in here? Yeah, but it's not as dramatic as it used to be, right? But the forge, that sounded like a good way to end it for me, right? So let's listen for it. Works for me. Let's go to this one. Now this one's got no idle. Alright, the idle's been commented out. And it should start with an avalanche. It should start with an avalanche, loop the medium fire, and end with the MP5, which we heard is not impressive. So let's hear what that sounds like. Uh-huh. The MP5 end, right? And that's because the MP5 end is tied up in the other loop. Okay? So don't do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the forge fire die back in there. Now let's restart the game. Alright, so the first one's still. And it's good game zombies. And the second one, no air because the forge die. See, it's in its own single one. It's not in a loop anywhere. And because I created a single one for it, I can use it in a loop. So if I wanted to use the MP5 end, I'd have to create a whatchamacallit for it. Now you're not hearing the avalanche because the avalanche file is actually listed as, where you at? Avalanche 1, right? You see, so it goes, this is what it's looking for, this audio clip right here. Now, I will tell you this. If you don't have a sound data node, if I put sound idle avalanche up here, you'd hear the avalanche sound. You don't need the 1 and all that crazy crap. But for the purpose of your sound data node, you need to use the correct path. And now let's go into game. Let's see if you hear the avalanche now that I gave it the correct, I guess, audio path. If it's in the data node, you got to have the correct path. And while this one is loading up, this is a useful thing to have, all the waves. You can compare it, you know what to choose from, right? Bears. And bear alert. Yeah, that'll scare somebody. I'll also have a list of all of the, see the paths for all of them. Alright. Okay. You hear? Now you can hear that, but the avalanche kind of overrides everything else, so it's I don't know if I want to use it for this. It's a bit much. But you can still hear the fire and the forged die and all that stuff, right? It's just, it's too much with the avalanche. Anyway, remember, you got to create your own sound data node. If you want to use something in here that doesn't, like the MP5 end, you got to create its own singular entry in order to use it in another sound data node. Alright, because you notice I have the forged fire die on multiple nodes. That's because it has a single node somewhere else. And that's it, folks.